He packed his son lunch every morning. So why did the boy come home starving? What this father discovered changed everything. Ethan Turner prided himself on being the kind of father who never missed the small things, from the way his son's shoelaces were tied too tight on rushed mornings to the exact amount of jelly Aiden liked on his sandwiches. Ethan paid attention. He had raised Aiden alone since he was 5, after his wife passed away unexpectedly. Since then, being both mother and father had become more than a responsibility. It had become Ethan's mission. Every morning, he packed Aiden's lunch with deliberate care. 2 turkey and cheese sandwiches, one with crust, one without. Sliced apples with a dash of cinnamon, a chocolate chip cookie, always soft in the center, and a juice box, the grape kind, not apple, because Aiden had once said the other tasted too much like homework. Ethan zipped the lunchbox closed and tucked it neatly into Aiden's backpack. He kissed his son on the head, wished him a good day, and sent him off to school knowing that whatever the day brought, his child would not be hungry. Or so he thought. It started with subtle signs. Aiden began coming home from school ravenous, not the usual after-school snacking kind of hungry. This was desperation. The moment he walked through the door, he'd bolt for the kitchen. He would tear into leftovers, devour crackers, cereal, anything he could find, barely pausing to say hello. Ethan noticed. He asked, gently at first, "You okay, bud? Didn't lunch fill you up today?" Aiden shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Yeah, just extra hungry." But Ethan knew his son, knew when something wasn't right. The way Aiden answered too quickly. The way he refused to meet his eyes. The way he stiffened, just a little, like he was afraid the question would go further. Still, Ethan didn't push. He wanted to believe it was a phase. Maybe Aiden was growing. Maybe gym class was wearing him out, more than usual. But the behavior didn't stop. It grew more intense. Every day, Aiden came home and ate like someone who hadn't had a meal in hours. And that's when the unease began to harden into something heavier. So one night, after Aiden had gone to bed, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with the lunchbox. He opened it and stared at the container. The same sandwich setup, the same snacks, still fresh, still carefully arranged. The next morning, he packed the lunch exactly as he always did, but this time, he made a mental inventory of everything inside. He noted the arrangement, the contents, even the way the cookie was tilted in its corner. He handed Aiden the bag with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Later that evening, as soon as Aiden stepped through the door, Ethan watched closely. "Hey, buddy," he called. "School okay?" "Yeah," Aiden replied without looking up. He headed straight for the fridge. By the time Ethan checked the lunchbox, his heart sank. It was empty. Not just eaten clean. Too clean. No crumbs, no wrappers, not even the apple core. It was as if it had never been touched. That night, Ethan didn't sleep well. Something was happening, something his son wasn't ready to say out loud. But he would find out. He had to, because no child should come home from school feeling like they hadn't eaten. Especially not when love, care, and a full lunchbox had gone with them that morning. And especially not when that child was his. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. As he stood in the kitchen packing Aiden's lunch, his hands moved with mechanical precision. His mind, though, raced with questions. What if Aiden was throwing the food away? What if someone was taking it from him? What if he was too embarrassed to say anything? Each possibility gnawed at Ethan's heart. He glanced at the lunchbox before zipping it closed committing its contents to memory again. 2 turkey sandwiches, apple slices, cookie, juice. Exactly as the day before. Aiden came downstairs quietly, too quietly. His usual morning chatter, the kind that used to fill the kitchen with talk of Pokemon cards and math quizzes, was gone. "Morning, bud," Ethan said, trying to sound normal. Aiden nodded without words, grabbing his backpack. "You sleep okay?" A subtle shrug. "All right, have a good day, okay?" Aiden nodded again, then disappeared out the door. Ethan stood there, in the quiet, his knuckles tightening around the edge of the kitchen counter. His gut told him this wasn't about a skipped meal. It was something else. Something that had turned his bright, funny boy into a silent shell of himself. He decided he couldn't wait anymore. That morning, Ethan called the school. When the secretary answered, he asked calmly, "Hi, I'd like to schedule a meeting with Principal Harris." "It's about my son, Aiden Turner." By 11 a.m., Ethan was walking through the halls of Elmridge Elementary, the school Aiden had attended for years. The walls were decorated with construction paper projects and class photos. Everything looked warm, familiar, safe. But Ethan couldn't shake the knot in his stomach. Principal Harris met him with a polite smile and handshake. "Mr. Turner, what brings you in today?" They sat. Ethan wasted no time. "My son's been coming home hungry every day, not just a little hungry starving. I pack his lunch, I know what's in it. But when I check, it's gone, and it doesn't look like it was eaten." The principal leaned back, brows furrowed. "That is strange. Has Aiden said anything?" Ethan shook his head. "He says he eats. But I know when my son's lying. And he's scared. I don't know of what, but something's wrong." Principal Harris nodded slowly. "I'll reach out to his teacher and see if anyone's noticed anything unusual." As the principal made a few calls, Ethan sat in silence. His foot tapped the floor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Finally, a soft knock at the office door. Miss Bennett, Aiden's homeroom teacher, stepped in. She was warm and kind, with tired eyes and a clipboard in her hand. "Aiden's a great kid," she said quickly. "Quiet, polite, never causes trouble. But now that you mention it, I have noticed he seems more withdrawn lately." Ethan leaned forward. "Do you know if he's eating at lunch? Sitting with anyone?" She hesitated. "I haven't seen him eat, to be honest. He usually sits alone or leaves the table early." Ethan's heart sank further. They were all missing it. His son was hiding something, and Ethan knew, whatever it wasn't going to stay hidden much longer. Miss Bennett offered to quietly pull aside a few of Aiden's classmates, the ones he usually sat near or played with during recess. The goal wasn't to interrogate them. Just ask gentle questions to see if they had noticed anything Ethan and the staff had missed. 3 kids came in, 2 boys and a girl, all no older than 10. They sat side by side in the principal's office, legs dangling from their chairs, sneakers gently tapping the floor. Principal Harris smiled reassuringly, trying to set a calm tone. "Hey there," he began, his voice soft and easy. "We just want to ask a quick question about your friend Aiden. Nothing bad, just something his dad is curious about." The kids exchanged glances. Tyler, a boy with messy blonde hair and scuffed sneakers, spoke first. "He doesn't eat lunch," he said bluntly. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Sophia, the girl sitting in the middle, tilted her head. "I don't think I've ever seen him open a lunchbox," she said. "He just says he's not hungry or walks away from the table. Sometimes he reads in the corner." Jaden, the second boy, fidgeted with the drawstring of his hoodie. "One time," he muttered, "I think I saw him throw something in the trash. But really fast, like he didn't want anyone to see." Ethan's stomach twisted. That confirmed it. The lunch wasn't being eaten. It wasn't being touched. "Did anyone ever say anything to him?" he asked gently. "Tease him about his food or anything?" Tyler shook his head. "No, nobody really talks to him much anymore. Especially in math class." That made Ethan pause. "What about math class?" Jaden and Sophia looked at each other. It was Sophia who finally spoke. "He's really quiet in there, even more than usual. He used to joke around with us before class, but now he just kind of shrinks." The kids were quiet after that, unsure if they had said something wrong. Ms. Bennett offered them smiles and thanked them for helping. Principal Harris dismissed them with a gentle nod. Once the door closed behind them, the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Ethan could feel the pieces starting to fall into place, but the picture they painted made his chest tighten. "I've noticed it too," Ms. Bennett finally said. "During morning periods, Aiden is responsive, sometimes even cheerful. But after math, he's a different child, withdrawn, edgy. He won't raise his hand anymore." Ethan leaned forward, fingers interlaced, knuckles white. "And his math teacher is Mr. Whitaker?" Principal Harris nodded. "He joined us at the beginning of the semester, came with strong credentials, hasn't raised any red flags until now." Ethan's voice lowered. "Credentials don't mean much to me if my kid comes home hungry and scared." Ms. Bennett hesitated before continuing. "The other day, I asked the class to write about their favorite part of school. Most kids drew pictures of recess, art class, friends. Aiden drew a lunchbox with a lock on it." Ethan sat back, stunned. "A lock?" She nodded. "When I asked about it, he just said, 'Sometimes lunch disappears.' I didn't know what to make of it at the time. I thought maybe someone was taking his food, another student, but now—" Principal Harris rubbed his temples. "This isn't proof, but it's a pattern, enough to take seriously." Ethan stood and began to pace. "You don't think it's another kid, do you? Someone bullying him into giving up his lunch?" "Possible," Harris admitted, "but unlikely. Kids who take food usually do it openly or someone sees it, and no other child has been reported as having more food than expected." Ethan turned back to them. "So that leaves one option." Neither of the adults responded immediately, but their silence said enough. "Miss..." Bennett folded her hands tightly in her lap. "We need to approach this carefully. If we confront Mr. Whitaker without cause, he could lawyer up, deny everything, and if he's innocent—" "He's not," Ethan interrupted. "You didn't see the way Aiden freezes when he hears the word math. That's not nerves, that's fear." Harris exhaled. "I understand how you feel. But the district has protocols. We need more than suspicions and drawings." "Then I'll get more," Ethan said, "because I'm not letting this go." He looked out the office window, watching kids walk to lunch. Laughing, carefree, and among them, his son. Quiet, head down, carrying a backpack with a lunchbox that no one ever saw. This wasn't just about food anymore. This was about control, and someone trusted was taking it from his son, one silent day at a time. Ethan didn't know how yet, but he was going to stop it. Whatever it took, no more guessing. No more waiting. He would bring the truth into the light, and he would make sure no one ever made his son feel small again. Not in silence, not in fear, not ever. Ethan sat in his car, just outside Elmridge Elementary, his fingers gripping the steering wheel tight. He watched the front doors of the school, where parents dropped off forgotten lunches and younger students skipped past with untied shoes. But Ethan wasn't there for a delivery. He wasn't there as a parent. He was there for answers. He checked his watch. It was a few minutes before the bell. Inside, Mr. Whitaker would still be in class, finishing up his morning period. Ethan's stomach churned at the thought of the man, the calm, composed teacher whose presence made his son retreat into himself. He had replayed the kid's words over and over. "He's really quiet in math class. He used to joke with us. Not anymore. And that lunchbox, with a lock." Ethan had seen a lot in life. He'd lost a wife, raised a child alone, rebuilt more than just a home. But this was different. This was someone deliberately making his child feel powerless, and he couldn't let that stand. When the bell finally rang and the hallway flooded with students, Ethan stepped out of his car and made his way toward the front office. The receptionist greeted him warmly, clearly remembering him from the day before. "Good morning, Mr. Turner. Principal Harris is expecting you." Ethan offered a quick nod. "Thank you." Principal Harris stood from his desk as Ethan entered. "I spoke with Miss Bennett again," he said quickly. "She's convinced something's going on, though she doesn't want to point fingers without proof." Ethan didn't waste time. "I want to talk to Mr. Whitaker myself." The principal hesitated. "He's in between classes right now. If you'd like, I can call him in." "Please do." Minutes later, the door opened and Mr. Whitaker stepped in. He looked exactly as Ethan expected, neatly dressed, calm, professional. "Too professional?" He extended his hand. "Mr. Turner, right? I've heard good things about Aiden. He's a bright kid." Ethan didn't take the handshake. Instead, he gestured toward the chair opposite him. "Please, sit." Whitaker sat, folding his hands casually on the desk. Principal Harris remained behind his own, watching. "I'm just here to ask a few questions," Ethan began, voice calm but firm. "It's come to my attention that my son hasn't been eating lunch at school. Not once in the past several weeks." Whitaker blinked. "That's concerning. I hadn't noticed." "He also seems to act differently in your class," Ethan continued. "Withdrawn, anxious." Mr. Whitaker's expression didn't change. "I do my best to create a safe and supportive learning environment, but some students are just naturally reserved." Ethan leaned in slightly. "Aiden wasn't like that before." The silence lingered. Ethan studied him. There were no beads of sweat, no shifting in his chair. Just that same polite mask. And something about that unsettled Ethan more than yelling ever could. "You've never seen him with lunch?" Ethan pressed. Whitaker gave a slight shrug. "I see hundreds of students every week. I don't keep track of who's eating." Ethan clenched his jaw. "So you wouldn't know if he was giving his lunch away, or if someone was taking it?" Mr. Whitaker smiled faintly. "I'm afraid I can't be of much help." The tone was just a shade too smooth, too rehearsed. Ethan sat back slowly. "I'm going to be very clear with you. Something is happening. And I don't know exactly what it is yet, but I know my son. I know the way he shrinks when he talks about math class. I know the way he lies about eating, and I know the fear in his eyes." Whitaker didn't flinch. "If you're suggesting I've done something inappropriate—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Ethan interrupted. "I'm telling you, if I find out someone is hurting my son mentally, physically, or otherwise, I will not stop until the truth comes out." Principal Harris raised a hand. "Let's keep this civil." Ethan nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving Whitaker. Of course. Mr. Whitaker stood. Well, if there's anything else I can do, let me know. I'd never harm a student. I hope we all want what's best for Aiden. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't have to, because in that moment, he knew. He knew what it felt like to stand in front of someone who had something to hide. The meeting ended, and Mr. Whitaker returned to his classroom. Ethan remained seated for a long moment. Principal Harris finally broke the silence. I understand your concern, but without evidence? I'll get it, Ethan said. He rose, his voice calm, almost cold. I'm done asking questions. It's time for answers. That night, Ethan sat in his kitchen long after Aiden had gone to bed. The silence in the house was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the slow ticking of the wall clock. He stared at his son's empty lunchbox sitting on the counter. Wiped clean, like always. But this time, it wasn't just frustrating, it was infuriating. Earlier that day, he'd looked into the eyes of a man who had all the right words, but none of the warmth. Mr. Whitaker had answered every question as if he'd rehearsed them, his voice polite and measured. But not once did he express concern. Not once did he ask how Aiden was doing. That told Ethan everything. The school couldn't act without proof. The principal had said so, and Ethan believed it. They needed more than instinct, more than a father's gut. They needed something undeniable. And that's exactly what Ethan planned to give them. He reached into the drawer near the fridge, pulling out a small box. Inside was a tiny voice recorder he'd used years ago during a legal matter at work. It was small, about the size of a thumb drive, and could easily fit inside a pocket or a backpack. He checked the battery, then plugged it into his laptop to make sure the microphone still worked. It did. The audio was clear, even at a distance. He took a deep breath. He hated the idea of involving his son in this, but Aiden had already been dragged into something darker. Now, it was time to shine a light. The next morning, Ethan moved through the usual routine as if nothing had changed. He packed the same lunch: 2 turkey sandwiches, apple slices, a cookie, and grape juice. Aiden came down the stairs slowly, dragging his feet. Morning, buddy, Ethan said softly, handing him the lunchbox. Aiden gave a weak smile. Thanks, Dad. Before zipping the backpack closed, Ethan tucked the recorder into the front pocket. He had set it to voice activation. It would only start recording when it picked up sound. Have a good day, Ethan said, trying not to let the tension in his chest show. You too, Aiden replied, pulling the door closed behind him. The hours that followed were some of the longest Ethan had ever lived. He couldn't concentrate at work. He kept checking the clock, tapping his pen, replaying the moment he'd slipped the device into Aiden's bag. He worried. What if nothing happened? What if the audio was unclear? Worse, what if Mr. Whitaker found it? But when Aiden returned home that afternoon, everything seemed normal. Too normal. He dropped his backpack by the door, mumbled a tired "hey," and made a beeline for the fridge. Ethan waited until his son went upstairs, then opened the bag. The lunchbox, as expected, was completely empty, not a crumb. But what mattered now wasn't the lunchbox. It was the small black device in the front pocket. Ethan grabbed it, his hands shaking slightly, and hurried to his office. He plugged the recorder into his computer, pulled up the audio file, and hit play. At first, there was only background noise, lockers slamming, chatter, the general chaos of a school hallway. Then came the sound of a zipper. A bag opening, then a voice, not Aiden's. "Give it to me." The tone was low, not angry, but cold, authoritative. Ethan's heart pounded. Aiden didn't answer right away. There was hesitation, then the rustling of plastic, then the voice again. "You know the rule. No questions." Aiden's voice followed, small and barely audible. "Can I keep the apple?" Another pause. "Eat it quick, and remember, don't say a word." Ethan sat back in his chair, stunned, his hands clenched into fists. The voice was unmistakable. It was Mr. Whittaker. The rest of the audio passed in a blur, more movement, distant classroom noise. But the damage was done. That one exchange, the quiet demand, the conditioned fear was all the proof he needed. Ethan saved the file, labeling it clearly. He stared at the computer screen, fury mixing with relief. He had it. He had the truth. And now, no one could ignore it. Ethan didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay in bed with the recording playing in his mind like a loop he couldn't turn off. "Give it to me. You know the rule. No questions. Eat it quick. And remember, don't say a word." Over and over, those words burned into his thoughts. There it was, undeniable proof that Mr. Whittaker, a trusted teacher, had been abusing his authority to take food from a child. From his child. And now, Ethan had a choice. He could march into the school, slam the recording on the principal's desk, and demand action. But first, there was someone he needed to talk to. Someone whose voice had been quiet for far too long. Aiden. The next morning, the sky outside was still grey when Ethan sat at the kitchen table, waiting for his son to come downstairs. He didn't prepare a lunchbox. Not today. When Aiden finally appeared, his steps were slower than usual. His shoulders slouched under the weight of a backpack and something heavier, something invisible, but just as real. "Morning," Aiden mumbled. Ethan looked up, giving him a small, steady smile. "Hey, buddy. Sit with me for a second." Aiden paused, then slid into the chair across from him. Ethan didn't speak right away. He just studied his son's face. The dark circles under his eyes. The way he kept his gaze low. The tension in his hands as they fidgeted on the tabletop. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I know what's been happening at school." Aiden froze. His fingers stopped moving. Slowly, his head lifted, his eyes wide. "I know about Mr. Whittaker," Ethan continued, voice calm but firm. "I heard the recording." Aiden's mouth parted. For a moment, he didn't breathe. Tears welled in his eyes, not from shame, but from something else. Relief. "I didn't mean to lie," he whispered. Ethan reached across the table and gently placed a hand over his son's. "I know. You were scared, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." Aiden swallowed hard. He said it was a rule. He said, if I told anyone, I'd get in trouble, or he would. I didn't want to make it worse. Ethan's voice stayed steady, though his heart ached. "You didn't do anything wrong, Aiden. Not one thing. What he did wasn't just mean, it was wrong. And you never have to be afraid to tell me the truth." Aiden nodded slowly. "Are you going to tell the school?" "I am," Ethan said. "But only after you're ready. You don't have to face him. I'll handle that part. But I need your voice in this. Even if it's just for me." Aiden took a deep breath. And then, for the first time, he talked. Really talked. He told Ethan about the first time it happened, how Mr. Whitaker had called him over after class, saw his lunchbox in the bag, and quietly took it. How it started as something small. Let me hold that for now, and turned into a routine. How Mr. Whitaker made it seem normal, like something they didn't talk about, just did. How he never yelled, never threatened loudly, but always left Aiden feeling like saying no wasn't an option. He smiled when he said it, Aiden whispered, but it wasn't a nice smile. Ethan listened without interrupting, letting every word land. His fists clenched beneath the table, but his face stayed calm. This wasn't about rage. It was about giving Aiden what he'd been missing: safety, space, and someone who believed him. When Aiden finished, he leaned back in his chair, exhausted, but lighter, as if just speaking had removed a weight he'd carried for too long. Ethan squeezed his hand gently. "I'm proud of you." Aiden blinked. "For what?" "For telling me the truth. For trusting me." "Are you going to make him stop?" Ethan stood slowly and nodded. "Not just stop. He's never going to do this to anyone again." Later that day, after dropping Aiden off at school with reassurances that he wouldn't have to face Whitaker again, Ethan returned home. He uploaded the recording to a secured file, printed a transcript, gathered the notes from Ms. Bennett, the student testimonies, and he added something new, a short statement from Aiden, written in shaky but determined handwriting. Just one paragraph. Just enough. Then he picked up the folder, slid it into a manila envelope, and headed for the school. It was time. Ethan arrived at the school just before the afternoon bell. The folder in his hand felt heavier than it should. It wasn't just paper, it was evidence. It was pain, and it was his son's courage printed in black ink. He entered the front office with a quiet intensity, nodding at the receptionist, who recognized him immediately. "Mr. Turner," she said, standing. "Principal Harris is expecting you." She buzzed the office door open, and Ethan stepped through, his jaw set. Principal Harris greeted him with a firm handshake and a concerned look. "You said you had something urgent?" Ethan handed him the envelope. "I need you to read what's in here. Right now." The principal didn't ask questions. He opened the envelope, slid the papers onto his desk, and began to read. First, the transcript of the recording, then the notes from Ms. Bennett, then the summary from the 3 classmates, and finally, Aiden's own written statement. As his eyes moved across the page, his face changed. What started as professional neutrality shifted into something else: horror, then anger. When he finished, he looked up. "Mr. Turner, this is serious." Ethan didn't sit. "I told you. I said something wasn't right. Now you have the proof." Principal Harris nodded slowly, gathering the papers back into the folder. "I need to call the district. And I need to have a formal meeting with Mr. Whitaker immediately." "I want to be in that meeting," Ethan said firmly. There was a pause, then Harris nodded again. "You should be." Within 15 minutes, the assistant principal escorted Mr. Whitaker into the room. He looked slightly confused, maybe even a little annoyed, but not nervous. That changed the moment he saw Ethan standing in the corner. Whitaker's eyes narrowed slightly. "What's this about?" Principal Harris didn't waste time. "Mr. Whitaker, serious concerns have been raised about your conduct toward one of your students, Aiden Turner." Whitaker sat straighter in his chair. "I don't understand." "What kind of concerns?" Harris slid the folder across the desk. Please read this. Whitaker opened it. As he flipped through the pages, Ethan watched every flicker of expression on the man's face. There was a shift subtle but undeniable. By the time he reached Aiden's statement, his fingers tensed. When he looked up, his composure had cracked. "This is a misunderstanding," he said quickly. Ethan stepped forward. "You told my son there were rules. You took his food, day after day. You made him believe he'd get in trouble if he told anyone. That's not a misunderstanding. That's manipulation." Whitaker opened his mouth, then shut it again. "I never meant to harm him." "That doesn't make it better," Principal Harris replied, voice sharp now. "This is not just inappropriate, it's abusive. You used your authority to control a child. That ends today." "I should have spoken up sooner," Ethan added, "but I'm speaking now." The room was silent. Then Harris reached for the phone on his desk. "I'm placing you on immediate suspension, pending a full investigation. District HR will contact you before the end of the day. Until then, you're not to return to this campus." Whitaker didn't argue. He stood slowly, as if all the air had left his body. When he walked out, Ethan didn't watch him go. He turned to the principal. "Thank you," he said simply. Principal Harris nodded. "I'm sorry it took this long." Ethan shook his head. "You believed me when you had proof. That's more than a lot of people would have done." "I'll make sure Aiden is supported," Harris promised. "We'll provide counseling, check-ins, whatever he needs." Ethan exhaled. Good. He's been through enough. And as he left the school that day, the air felt different. He hadn't just protected his son, he had given him his voice back. The news spread through Elmridge Elementary faster than wildfire. By the next morning, everyone from the front office to the playground monitor had heard that Mr. Whitaker had been suspended. Students whispered in hallways. Parents exchanged knowing glances at morning drop-off. And while most people didn't know the details, they knew enough to feel the shift in the air. A teacher had crossed a line. And a father had done something about it. But while the outside world buzzed with rumors, Ethan focused on one thing only: his son. It wasn't over. Not really, because trauma doesn't end when justice begins. It lingers in quiet looks, in guarded words, in moments that used to be ordinary. That morning, Aiden moved slower. He looked out the window longer, picked at his breakfast. Ethan didn't push. He sat beside him at the table reading the paper, but not really reading it, just being there. When it was time for school, Ethan drove Aiden himself. No bus today. As they pulled into the parking lot, Aiden spoke. "Will he be there?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan shook his head. "No. He's gone, and he's not coming back." Aiden nodded slowly, processing. "Okay." They sat in the car for another moment, neither of them moving. Then Aiden turned. "Can you walk me in?" Ethan smiled. "Of course." Inside the building, the difference was subtle, but real. Ms. Bennett gave Aiden a reassuring pat on the shoulder. The front desk receptionist offered Ethan a warm glance. People were paying attention now. Aiden's classmates were different too. He wasn't invisible anymore. At lunch, one of the boys from the earlier interview, Jaden, sat beside him. "You can eat now, right?" he asked, unwrapping his sandwich. Aiden smiled shyly. "Yeah." Jaden grinned. "Cool. My mom packed extra Oreos." He slid 2 cookies across the table. And just like that, Something small but important as mending. Back at home that afternoon, Ethan met with Principal Harris and a school counselor. "We'd like to offer Aiden weekly support sessions," the counselor explained. "Nothing formal, just a space for him to talk if he wants." Ethan agreed immediately. "I think he needs to know this isn't his fault, that he didn't do anything wrong." The counselor nodded. "That's what we're here for." In the weeks that followed, things didn't magically go back to normal. But something better happened. Aiden began to open up. Not just about Mr. Whitaker, but about school, friends, his worries. He talked about the books he liked, the games he wanted to try. Ethan noticed he laughed more. He asked more questions. One evening, as they were folding laundry together, Aiden looked up. "Dad? Yeah, buddy? Did I help stop him?" Ethan stopped folding, turned to face him. "You did more than that. You helped make sure no other kid has to go through what you did." Aiden thought about it, then nodded, slowly. "Okay." That weekend, they went to the park. They ran the trails. Aiden chased ducks by the pond. They ate ice cream on the curb and laughed when it dripped onto their shoes. It wasn't about pretending everything was fine. It was about remembering joy and reclaiming peace. Because healing doesn't come in a wave. It comes in moments. And for the first time in a long time, they had that moments and a future that finally felt like it belonged to them again. It arrived 3 weeks later in a plain white envelope tucked between bills and a pizza flyer. At first, Ethan didn't think much of it, but when he saw the return address, Elmridge School District Office, he paused. The envelope was thin, but carefully sealed. He opened it slowly, reading each line twice. It wasn't a thank you card. It wasn't an apology either. It was a formal acknowledgement from the district superintendent. They had concluded their internal investigation. Mr. Whitaker had officially resigned. And in bold letters near the bottom of the page, "Mr. Whitaker will no longer be permitted to seek employment within the Elmridge Unified School District, nor in any affiliated academic institution." Ethan folded the letter, exhaling. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't celebration. It was closure. Later that night, after dinner, Ethan sat with Aiden on the porch. The late spring air was warm, the sky blushing with sunset. They had gotten into the habit of ending their days here, just the two of them and the crickets. Aiden swung his legs slowly from the porch steps. He didn't ask about the letter, but somehow Ethan knew he didn't need to. "I got word today," Ethan said quietly. "He's not coming back, and he can't do this to any other kids ever again." Aiden nodded, not saying anything at first. Then, softly, "Good." They sat in silence for a while. Then Aiden turned toward his father. "Can I write something?" Ethan looked over. "Like a letter?" "Yeah, but not to him. To the kids who might be scared like I was. I want to tell them it's okay to speak up." Ethan smiled slowly. "I think that's a beautiful idea." Aiden got up, went inside, and came back with a notebook. He curled up in the wicker chair beside his dad, pencil in hand. He didn't ask for help. He didn't need it. The words came slowly, but they came. He wrote about fear, about the way it feels to carry a secret so heavy it makes your shoulders slump. He wrote about the voice in your chest that tells you it's not okay to tell someone. Then he wrote about the moment that changed everything, the moment he realized his dad wasn't mad, but proud. He ended it with one sentence. "You don't have to be loud to be brave." Ethan read it quietly when Aiden handed it to him. Then he folded it carefully and told his son, "Let's show this to your counselor. Maybe it can help someone else." The next day, Ms. Fletcher, the school counselor, cried when she read it. Not loudly. Just one tear, brushed away quickly. "I'd love to share this with permission," she said. And so it went up on a bulletin board in the counselor's hallway. Typed and printed neatly, with a title added by Ms. Fletcher, "A Letter to the Quiet Ones." A few days later, a girl named Zoe left a sticky note underneath it. It read, "I didn't know I could say something. I'm going to now." Ethan never told Aiden about the note. He didn't need to. Because something in Aiden shifted that week, he stood a little straighter, laughed a little louder. And when a new student joined their class and looked unsure of where to sit at lunch, Aiden was the one who waved him over. The healing hadn't just continued, it had rippled. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan realized this wasn't just about protecting his son. It was about changing something bigger, one voice at a time. By the time summer rolled around, everything had changed. Not just in the school, not just for Aiden, but in the quiet corners of a father's heart. There had been no grand celebration, no parade or ceremony, just small things. Real things. One afternoon, Ethan and Aiden stood together outside the school office. The final bell of the year had just rung. Kids ran to buses, tossing backpacks over their shoulders, summer dreams already filling their eyes. But Aiden didn't run. He stood beside his dad, smiling gently. "You ready?" Ethan asked. Aiden nodded. "I think so." They walked inside, where Principal Harris and Miss Fletcher were waiting with a simple certificate, a recognition of courage. It wasn't flashy, just a few lines printed neatly, signed with care. To Aiden Turner, for reminding us that strength is often quiet, but never small. Ethan watched his son read the words. Aiden didn't say anything. He just held the paper tightly, a quiet glow in his chest. Outside, the world carried on. But inside that office, something important had settled. A story had ended, and a new one had begun. Over the summer, Aiden joined a community reading program at the library. He volunteered to help younger kids with chapter books. He didn't talk about what had happened unless someone asked, but when one little boy clutched his book tightly and whispered, "I'm not good at this," Aiden knelt beside him and said, "Neither was I. But we can learn it together." And that was enough. At home, Ethan found himself less on edge. He still checked in, still asked questions, but the fear that used to wake him in the middle of the night had softened. One day, he asked Aiden what he wanted to do with his summer. "Can we build something?" Aiden asked. "Like a treehouse?" "No," Aiden said. "Something for other kids. Like a little free pantry, for lunches, for kids who don't have any." Ethan paused, then smiled. "Yeah, buddy, we can do that." And so, they spent the next few weeks gathering wood, painting signs, and setting up a small pantry outside the library. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of peanut butter crackers, juice boxes, granola bars. Aiden left a handwritten sign. "Take what you need. You're not alone." By August, the pantry was refilled daily. Families left notes of thanks. A local news reporter stopped by to take a photo, but Aiden declined to be in it. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's for them." As the new school year approached, Ethan watched his son pack his own lunchbox one morning, not because he had to, but because he wanted to, because now lunch wasn't a symbol of fear. It was a reminder of choice, of agency, of healing. Ethan poured himself coffee and stood in the kitchen doorway. "First day of 5th grade," he said with a smile. "You nervous?" Aiden zipped his bag and shrugged. "Maybe a little, but not in the bad way." Ethan nodded. "That's the best kind." And as they walked to the car, Aiden paused at the door. "You think, if someone else ever needs help, I'll know what to do?" Ethan looked at him, heart full. "I think you already do." Then the door closed behind them, and the day began. Not with fear, but with hope. In a world that often moves too fast to notice the quiet suffering of others, this story reminds us that true strength lies in paying attention. Ethan's journey as a father shows us that protecting a child doesn't always mean shielding them from pain. It means being willing to listen, to believe, and to act, even when it's uncomfortable. Aiden's experience teaches that silence, when rooted in fear, can be broken with trust and love. For older generations who have seen the best and worst of institutions, this story offers a powerful reminder. The systems we trust are only as strong as the people who hold them accountable. Whether you're a parent, a grandparent, or a neighbor, your voice still matters. Standing up for what's right doesn't always require a crowd. Sometimes it begins at the kitchen table with a simple question: "Are you okay?" And the courage to keep asking until someone feels safe enough to answer.